What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today, let's talk about shock pistons. All right, so here we are with another week of our shock tuning guide, Let's Talk series, going over everything that you need to know about shocks. Now, before I jump too far into today's video, I want to remind everybody we do still have our holiday mega waffle going on for these two TLR vehicles. So make sure you stay till the end so you can find out how you could win both of these two kits. Now that I've again gotten your attention a second week in a row, set these guys down and we will start talking about today's topic. So today we are going to discuss our shock pistons and what kind of tuning adjustments you can make with them and when you want to change to a different shock piston. Now, there's a couple different ways that I can attack this, which is the ultra super duper technical in-depth way, and then there's the more general idea way, which gives the kind of basic information on it, what to look for, when to use them, which in my opinion, I think is going to be a lot easier to follow and is going to be a lot easier for your typical weekend racer to really understand. Like I've said many times before, shocks are exceptionally confusing. So I think today I'm gonna mostly just go over the kind of base information, and then maybe in a later video, in a later, much longer video, I can go super duper into detail more about what each of the pistons are actually going to do. But without further ado, because pistons are of course very small, we are going to go ahead, bring the camera up close, get you guys a view of my pit board in front of me with the pistons out in front, and we'll go ahead and start talking about them. All right, so sat here in front of me is going to be, of course, our few different base piston options, and then we got some MIP pistons that I'm going to talk about as we continue through the video. As you can see, I ended up just doing this on the pit mat. Unfortunately, the lights gave a weird glare on the pit board, so I decided we'll just do the pit mat that way. Visually, it's a little bit more pleasing. Obviously, with the packaging for the MIP, you're gonna get a glare off that, but I'm doing the best I can. So the first thing that I'm gonna go over is just the couple of different options we have in front of me based off of the hole count. So that is going to be, of course, we've got our 5-hole piston, we've got a 6-hole piston, and then we've got an 8-hole piston. And these are going to be the most common 3 you're going to see. There's a few extras out there, something like the 20-hole pistons or 10-hole pistons, but these are gonna be the pistons that you see the majority of the time. And then in the MIP bypass, I believe you can get 5, 6, or 8-hole pistons, so you can get the full lineup. Now to talk about the the 3 different types of pistons on the actual shape itself. Before I spin this over, this is going to be a flat piston, and then this is going to be a taper piston, and then here we're going to have a bypass style piston. So the flat piston is going to give a more similar upstroke as it is downstroke, because it is of course the same on both sides. Whereas something like this taper piston here, you're going to have the same kind of upstroke path, but your downstroke, the fluid is going to be able to work around it a lot quicker because it's tapered, so you're going to get quicker rebound. So this is going to be a more similar up and downstroke. This is going to be if you are looking for a little bit quicker downstroke compared to your upstroke. And then of course the MIP bypass pistons are going to be a flat-based piston, but with all of the bypass holes in it, it's got valves, and that's how you can set your rebound. So instead of using a taper or a flat, you set it with these flaps that you can see in this little tin here. Now to talk about the actual hole, like the amount of holes to look for and what styles of tracks you're going to be on. Traditionally, you're going to use a 5-hole piston on something that is going to be a little bit rougher, something where the shock needs to work quicker, whereas the 8-hole piston is going to be more of a slower speed piston. You're not going to have as much upstroke or downstroke in the sense of it's going to work more slowly, I guess you could say. So it's going to be better on something like a higher grip or a smoother track. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, in theory, the 8-hole piston has more holes in it, so why is this one a slower responding piston compared to our 5-hole? So that is going to be because even though we have more holes in this piston, they're going to be smaller holes. So we'll talk about that as well right here. I got lots of information coming out at you. So an 8-hole piston, traditionally you're going to see a 1-2 or a 1-3 size hole. So you have more holes, but they're going to be a 1-2 or 1-3. Whereas something like this 5-hole piston over here, more traditionally you're going to see holes somewhere in the 1.4 to 1.6 area. So even though this has less holes, so you would think it would be a stiffer shock, because of those hole sizes being so much larger, the piston can allow the fluid to flow much more rapidly through. Whereas with the 8-hole, it's got smaller holes, so it's a little bit harder for that oil to work through. Now, if we were to say, make this a 515 and this an 815, then of course our 815 would be quite a bit softer because the oil is going to be able to go through it much quicker. Now, I know I haven't talked much about our center piston here, our 6-hole, and that's because I wanted to kind of talk more about the extremes on one side or the other. The 6-hole is going to be, in my opinion, kind of like the perfect balanced piston. It's not necessarily the quickest, and it's not necessarily the slowest. It's going to work more versatile. It's going to work better in more conditions. It's going to be a more balanced setup because it has a wider range of opportunity to use it. Whereas the 5-hole, again, is going to be more specific to the bumpy. 8-hole is going to be more specific to the smooth. This gives kind of a middle ground, and as I told you guys before, I told you the hole size is traditionally for a 5-hole and an 8-hole. Traditionally for a 6-hole, you're going to see anywhere from a 1-3 to a 1-5 piston hole, depending on just what you're looking for. So each of the pistons here, not only do they have different hole counts, but they will traditionally use different hole sizes as well. So now that we've gone over each of the hole counts, the general hole sizes you'll see, and kind of when you're going to see each of these pistons being used, now I'm going to go ahead and tell you the most frequently used setups for them. And what you'll notice is that traditionally the front is going to be a little bit smaller of a hole compared to the rear. So on our 5-hole piston, a lot of times you'll see a 514 front, 515 rear, or a 515 front, 516 rear. And the reason for using that a little bit softer compared to the front is that it will make the car feel better around the track, in the sense of you'll have more rear grip in comparison to the front based on the shock. Now, obviously, you know, depending on springs and oils and track conditions, some of that can change a little bit, but usually having more rear grip to front grip is easier to drive compared to having more front grip to rear grip. Now on our 6-hole piston, a lot of times the most common setup you'll see is going to be a split hole setup. So you're going to see in the front something like a 3-hole 1-3 and a 3-hole 1-4. And usually what I'll do is I will go every other hole. So like if I go, well, I can't really use my finger. It's too big covering the piston. But you know, I'll do like a 1-3 hole, then a 1-4, a 1-3, a 1-4, and a 1-3, so on. That way, even though I don't think it makes a huge difference when it's actually in the shock, I like to think that it's more balanced because it's every other hole. But nonetheless, you're gonna run a 3-1-3, 3-1-4 front, and then a 3-1-4, 3-1-5 rear. That is gonna be the most traditional 6-hole setup. And then 8-hole setup is going to be more similar to what kind of like that 5-hole is, where you're not going to necessarily do as much of the drilling end of things, but you'll use like an 8-1-2 front and an 8-1-3 rear. So then to talk about the MIP pistons that are going to be in front of me here. So what this is going to allow you to do is, obviously your base holes are going to be the same because you're going to have to choose whether it's a 5, a 6, or an 8-hole piston when you get them. But what this allows you to do is fine tune the shock a little bit more. So like I was saying earlier in the video, you can set your rebound based off of these valves here. Each of the valves are going to be a different thickness. So in the actual MIP kit itself, you're going to see, I believe, a clear, a green, and a blue. And if I remember correctly, the clear is going to be the thickest, blue is going to be the thinnest. So to go along with, again, another thing I said earlier, where we usually have the front a little bit more numb compared to the back, a little bit less reactive. Something in the front with these bypass pistons, usually you'll do a clear flap in the front, and then in the rear of the car, you'll do a blue flap. That way, just like this taper piston, you get a more similar upstroke, but a more aggressive downstroke compared to the front of the vehicle. and that can help just make the shock absorb bumps a little bit easier. Now, if you want to go for a more similar feel to what a flat front, flat rear piston would be, then you would do something like a clear flap in the front and then a clear flap in the back. And then you can also go another step, and let's say you don't want to feel the valve effect at all. You could buy another set of the valves. That way you get 2 of each of them. And then what you'll see is 2 clear flaps in the front, 2 clear flaps in the back. And that's gonna be more similar to what just a standard flat piston is. Now, obviously, these pistons are going to be a little bit more expensive compared to the kit ones. And for the majority, I don't think it's gonna make the most ginormous difference in the sense of you're not gonna be changing valves all the time. It's still gonna be kind of, you set it up, and once you find the setup that works for you, you're pretty much gonna use it everywhere. So like for me, for example, I do use these MIP pistons and I use them in the 6-hole configuration. So I'll have a 313 front, 314 rear. Nope, said that wrong. 313, 314 front piston. I mixed up the numbers there, that's my bad. And then the rear will be that 314, 315. And then I'll use a clear flap in the front and then the blue flap in the back. And that is gonna be a setup that, like I said, for me personally is very balanced. It works at a lot of tracks. You're not gonna have to change out your piston a super duper amount of times. It's just gonna be a matter of kind of changing your oil to whatever the temperature and track surface is like. And of course, I went over shock oil in the previous video. So because shocks are the most confusing thing on the planet, I like to just keep it super simple, run the same thing everywhere, and just tune oil and spring to whatever the conditions are for that given day, because it just makes life easy and I can focus more on my driving end of things. Now, the one thing that I didn't go over that I'm gonna kind of loop back in here at the end is that sometimes, you'll see maybe one hole is drilled out a little bit larger compared to the others. That is going to more specifically be for, let's say you're driving around the track and you need just a little bit more movement, like the teeniest amount. You can drill out one of the holes to be a little bit larger. That way you get a slightly softer piston. But again, that's gonna be something that I think is just way on the more technical side of things. And if you're somebody like Ryan Mayfield, Dakota Fend, you're probably gonna notice that. Whereas for the majority of racers, and myself included, I don't think that I would notice it a whole lot. I just don't think it's gonna make a huge difference. So don't get super duper lost in it. If you're gonna run one of these pistons, use the general hole sizes that I said earlier in the video. That way you don't have to think too much about it and drive yourself crazy thinking about pistons. So now that we've gone over all of the different attributes of our pistons, when you're gonna see them, what styles of pistons there are, hole sizes, the whole kit and caboodle, let's go ahead and spin you around and we will end the video off with going over our TLR Mega Waffle. Adrenaline RC, and myself included, because of course I'm posting onto the Adrenaline page, is very happy to announce that we are doing a TLR Mega Waffle in lieu of the holiday season that we are in at the moment. So up for grabs this time is going to be the TLR 22X4 Elite 10-skill 4-drive buggy and the TLR 8X/E 2.0. And the keyword that I use there is going to be the word "and." For a $10 ticket, you have the opportunity, if your ticket is selected, to win not just one kit, but 2 kits. So I believe at the moment, as of the recording of this video right now, this guy goes for right at like the 570 area, and this guy goes for the 700 area. So for a single $10 ticket, you have the opportunity to take home both of these kits. We won't worry about doing any like shipping charges or anything. It is just that $10 ticket. And if you win, if we need to ship it to you, we'll get it shipped out. Or if you're local, you can of course come pick it up anytime you want. Now this waffle is going to be going until December the 22nd. And then the following day, December the 23rd, is when I will go ahead and announce the winner of these 2 kits. So best of luck to you. Get those tickets in, and we'll see you in the giveaway end of things on December the 23rd. Thank you for joining us for today's video, and we'll catch you guys next week.